right, well, they did it. They let us live to see a 5th episode. Welcome in to another episode of the Spring Blake College Football Show. I am Spring Blake. This is a college football show, your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knower show. If you are here for the first time, first of all, thank you for joining us. Make sure while you're here, hit a like, hit a subscribe, hit a 5-star review. Any support you give to this show, I will give you in tenfold. If you're returning, thank you. Make sure, did you like, did you subscribe, did you share with a few friends? If not, go ahead and do it right now. I'll give you a 5-second pause. I can't count. Thank you. Show some love on the social medias as well, too. Head over to @SpringBlakeCFB. That is both Twitter and TikTok. A lot of shorts put out there. A lot of other conversations we're having on those social media platforms. And again, just a huge thank you to all the support. Again, a week and a half into this thing now. I'm loving it as much as anything I've done. The interaction we've been getting, specifically on TikTok, YouTube as well, too, makes me feel very good about the work that we are doing here. Now, that being said, and today, I should say, we've got Big Ten tiers. We did the SEC on Monday. This is now Wednesday. We're going to go through and tier out the Big Ten Conference. I love doing this show, but I need to self-scout myself. Last episode on Monday sucked. It was actually really bad. I finished it up, and I was like, nah, don't really love what we did there. So we're going to make a few adjustments, and the first being, we're getting rid of the dumb friend tiers in the conference. I was recording that one at I think 7:30, 8 in the morning. It broke my brain trying to figure out, this team's a Teddy, this team's a Jack. What the hell am I doing? Who do I think I am? We're not doing that. Scratching the friends. We're just going to tier them out in the actual tiers that they should be. I don't know why my dumb brain thought it'd be funny to just rank my friends and then make them into college football teams. You live and you learn. Self-scouting. That's a thing in the past. I'm sorry if you really wanted a good SEC preview and I gave you that crap. Won't happen again. There was one other thing I didn't like about last episode. What was it? Oh, yes. We're going to change this with the Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12. I am not going to go in as much detail with some of these lower level teams. I think the plan now is to talk in detail about the top 3 tiers, that being national title contenders, playoff/conference title contenders, and then sleeper sneaky teams. And then maybe we'll just highlight a bowl team, a team that's at the bottom that needs work to do. Again, I want to make this about the stuff that is really important in this sport. If you're a Michigan State fan and you're coming to me for a deep analysis on the Spartans this year, I'll give you a little juicy nug. I'll give you a little nugget, but I'm not going to give you 5 minutes on the Spartans because I think there's a little bit more important stuff going on in the world of college football. Those were the 2 biggest notes. There also is a scheduling update, and you guys don't care, but I'm going to say it just because I care. Monday was SEC preview. This is Wednesday Big Ten preview. ACC is going to be on Friday. Big 12, little bit of an adjustment. We're not going to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday the following week. Traveling, content, it just got to be too much to put in before I went out of town. So what we're going to do next week is a Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So that way we can get the Big 12 in on Tuesday, do some playoff conference title picks on Wednesday, and then preview week 0 on that following Friday. I can't believe we've already made it to week 0 at that point. It's really exciting. So that's all the housekeeping stuff I wanted to go over. As a reminder, I'm going to battle with ChatGPT, and not just battling them, but battling how I can pronounce that. I messed up 5 different times saying ChatGPT in last Monday's episode. Going to battle with ChatGPT all college football season. I want to see if I'm a bigger, better ball knower than AI. So each conference preview, I'm giving my 3 favorite team totals. ChatGPT is giving their favorite 3 totals. It, they, he, she, I don't know. We're going to tally them up. We're going to do a few futures on national champion, conference title maybe, Heisman, and then we're going to do best bets of each week throughout the college football season. So I'm taking them on headstrong. I will be declared a better ball knower than AI by the end of this season. Guaranteed. Another thing I noticed when doing the show on Monday is that I leaned down and spoke into this microphone very closely, and I could hear the quality a lot better. So I'm going to even adjust it even a little bit more so right here, because I hope that this gives the best audio quality. I won't find out for another hour when I go back and edit this and put it back out. Hopefully it worked. But yes, let's just dive right into the fun stuff. This is going to be our Big Ten tiers, predictions for the season, where I've got teams finishing in the standings. And man, it's a doozy because it's a conference of 18 teams, and thus the reason why I decided those teams at the bottom we're not really going to go into with that much detail. The fun stuff's at the top. There's a lot of fun stuff in the middle. Unlike the SEC, unlike the ACC, and unlike the Big 12, the Big 10 gets a little bit of a tier adjustment here. So my first tier was always just the national title contenders. And then tier 2 was conference title contenders / playoff contenders. Whether that being in the mix for a conference title and getting an at-large bid, making the conference title game, what have you. The Big 10 to me is structured in such a way that my national title contenders are also my only conference title contenders. So this is going to be lumped in as a national contender, Big 10 title contender. It's 3 teams. I think you guys can guess those 3, but just a small adjustment compared to what we do in these other conferences, because I think it is a little bit more open in those, as opposed to who can either maybe get the second spot in the conference or who might be both teams making it to the title game. So without further ado, let's get into the fun stuff. Atop the Big Ten for me, for the 2025 regular season, they were not only my number 1 power-rated team in the nation heading into this year. Go ahead and listen to my Sweet 16 I did a week ago today. If you want my top 16 teams, this was the number 1 power-rated team. I'm backing it up in the standings as well. The Penn State Nittany Lions finishing with the best record in the Big Ten and securing a spot in the conference title game for the second year in a row. So as I said, in that Sweet 16, and for a few of these teams at the top that I have already discussed, I'm going to do the Spark Notes version. As to why I like the team, questions I have, all that stuff. Spark Notes on Penn State. It's a little long and a mouthful. Great head coach. One of the best one of the best coordinator duos in the nation. Star quarterback. Star running back room. Top tier offensive line. A well-rounded receiving core, and every level of the defense is a top 5 unit in the country. Sounds like a really great team. And then almost just as important these days in the world of super conferences and 18 teams in the Big Ten, almost as important as talent is the schedule, which is also pretty good for Penn State this year. They avoid Michigan, Illinois, and USC, and they get their two of their toughest 3 games, that being against Indiana and Oregon at home. They've got 1 tough road trip out to Columbus. We know how important that is for the can't win the big one narrative, but it's also coming off their bye week, so a really good opportunity for them to be rested heading into what will be the biggest game of their season. I think this is the year that Penn State at the very least splits its games against Ohio State should they see each other twice. Is that foreshadowing? I think it was. Penn State, number 1 team in the Big Ten regular season. So next up, despite the fans of this team thinking that I hate them, because last week I said they are just the 8th best roster / coaching staff in the nation, I've still got the Ohio State Buckeyes here, finishing 2nd in the Big Ten and making an appearance in the conference title game to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions. So I think some roster and coaching staff turnover may hurt them early in the season, which is what I alluded to last week when I said I had them down at 8. Jim Knowles to Matt Patricia, I think it's a significant difference. A lot of new starters on the defense. It just might take some time to get going. However, I compared it to the same situation Michigan found themselves in last year coming off their title in 2023. They also had to go through a lot of turnover, coaching staff, roster, and the defense just took a while to get going. Now, the difference between that is that Michigan's offense couldn't do simple math at the time. They just couldn't do math. Ohio State is in calculus. No matter who is in at quarterback, receiver, they are always going to have things rolling at offense. So even if the defense does take a small step back, like I think it might to begin the year, the offense will pick up the slack and keep the engine humming. And the schedule does work out nice for Ohio State as well, too. It's not just Penn State getting some nice schedule luck here. Texas and Penn State, their two toughest games of the year, are both at home. And we also know how important that regular season finale in Ann Arbor is going to be. So that's another tough game on the schedule. And I also think the trips out to Washington and Illinois are sneaky, but I still think there's a clear talent edge to the Scarlet and Gray in those games. And yeah, it's been 5 years since the Buckeyes won a conference title, and I've got them playing Penn State for a chance to end that drought later on in the season. I'm not ready to make that pick just yet. We'll make that as we get closer to week 0, I believe. But Penn State, Ohio State, my top two teams in the conference, battling it out, and also two teams that will certainly be in the national championship conversation. And then despite not having this next team play for a conference title in 2025, I have one final team of the Big Ten in that national championship contender. Surprise, surprise, it's Dan Lanning's Oregon Ducks. Oregon has reached the waves of talent point in their program, like the Georgias and the Ohio States have. Yes, they lose a ton of talented players every season, and it certainly hit them again this past offseason. But just like Georgia and Bama and Ohio State, they've got a whole new batch of them waiting in the wings to take their turn and are ready to take over. I think the featured trio on offense is going to be so exciting, as it always is. You know, it was Bo Nix and the receivers, and I forget who the tailback was 2 years ago, Bucky Irving. And then this past year, it was Dylan Gabriel, the receivers, and Jordan James. This year, it's going to be Dante Moore at quarterback. I think he'll fit in perfectly with Will Stein's offense. I think he's going to be one of those immediate impact players. You also have DeCorian Moore out wide, true freshman wideout. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the same impact as a Ryan Williams or a Jeremiah Smith had last year, but this is going to be the focal point of the passing attack, especially with Evan Stewart out for what I believe to be the full season. He'll step in and just be one of those like, oh no, you don't have to worry about Evan Stewart. Like, I'm that guy. So he'll be in at wide receiver. And then they brought in the transfer Mekhi Hughes from Tulane. I think he's from Tulane. And he just fits that same prototype of, oh, that's an awesome smash mouth running back for Oregon. I think it's that trio. New pieces along the offensive line, of course, but I think they're in a position now where the talent just kind of works itself out after the first few games of the season. Even with the losses on defense, and that includes 3 NFL dudes up front that they lost to the draft, I think it's still a top 3 to 5 group in the conference. Now, schedule-wise, they avoid Michigan and Ohio State. They do get Penn State, Iowa, and Washington all on the road. 3 tough road games, certainly. I think they'll have their hands full with Penn State. And the way this shook out in the standings, I'm just going to call for one other slip up on the schedule to have them missing out on the conference title game, but still being one of those first at-large teams to make the college football playoffs. So Oregon Ducks, number 3 in the Big Ten, still a national title contender.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So that takes us outside of the national title contenders in the Big Ten, but we still have a really fun group in the college football playoff contending range. And it starts as my number 4 team in the conference, and it will be no drop-off from the dream season that was 2024. I've got the Indiana Hoosiers as my number 4 team in the conference, and a group that I think has a really good shot at making the college football playoffs for the second year in a row. I've done this more than enough times already on this show, despite it only being the 5th episode. Fernando Mendoza, that dude at quarterback, ready to shine in the Cignetti-Shanahan offense. I've yet to see a quarterback play poorly in this offense, and that dates all the way back to the first few years at JMU. So I don't really think that it's going to be all too difficult, and on top of that, I think Fernando Mendoza might be the best thrower of the football to play in this offense. So if that's the case, I think things could really take off in the passing attack for the Hoosiers this year. Now, yes, Indiana had a really easy schedule last year, but they didn't just beat that schedule. They demolished a lot of those lesser teams. It wasn't like this, we've joked, and I'll talk about Illinois later on in this preview, but it wasn't like Illinois beating Purdue 50-49. Like, they were routing teams by 50 points, and they were stomping on them if they weren't, at the same level in terms of caliber of teams. So this year's schedule is tougher, but not it's not this unbearable path that they have to go on. And the difference between playoffs or not probably comes down to how they face or how they fare against Illinois and Iowa in back-to-back weeks, kind of early in the season as well, too. If they can go 2-0 in those games, they're probably in the playoffs. But if they split, they'll need to knock off one or of Oregon or Penn State. Both of those games are on the road to give themselves a shot. So if they can get by Iowa and Illinois, I think losing to Penn State and Oregon is fine. But if you slip up to one of those two teams that I just mentioned, you're going to have to go into Eugene or you're going to have to go into Happy Valley and knock off a really talented team. Either way, no matter how it shakes out, I'm incredibly impressed with what Indiana has become since Ignetti showed up. And I think they'll prove that it wasn't just a flash in the pan with a really strong follow-up season in 2025. Oh, look at that. We actually have our first bet of the Big Ten preview. ChatGPT comes in. Indiana over 8.5 wins. That is at plus 114 odds. So clearly thinking they will at least get through, 9 wins. So that means they can lose to Penn State and Oregon and flip those. Actually, that's a pretty good bet, ChatGPT. I'll give you credit. That's a good total to take. We're in the middle of recording. I think this mic is a little too high now, so we're going to lower it down. I don't know. Now I'm in my head with this microphone. Shit. All right, let's move along. My 5th team in the Big Ten for the 2025 regular season. I'm ready to come in hot with this one. I've got the USC Trojans, and I think there's a really good shot for this team to snag one of the final at-large bids in the college football playoffs. So we've talked in the first episode of this show how important this year is for USC, but we didn't get the chance to really dive into how last year was just a season from absolute hell and kind of excusable if you're someone that's clamoring for Lincoln Riley to lose his job. So the schedule was bad. It was the 3rd worst in the country, first year in the new conference. They had to face Notre Dame, LSU, Michigan, Penn State, really tough games. They also had 5 individual plays, 5 back-breaking plays that swung outcomes in their first 5 losses of the season. Yes, it is really dumb to play the what-if game on just, that play versus that play versus that play, but you're talking about the chance of being 9-0 versus 4-5, and then having to overcome all of that negative momentum. Again, I'm not here to play the what-if game, but if you're paying close attention to what that tells you, it's showing that they're better than they're probably getting credit for heading into this season. And that's where we come in to make our money on this team. So if the luck and the schedule gods are even just a little bit kinder to the Trojans this season, and we know for a fact that at least the schedule ones are, then there's no way this team should finish outside the top 5 teams in this conference. They go from the 4th hardest schedule in the nation. So I guess I had that wrong. Was it the 3rd toughest or the 4th? Let's say 3rd. Stats guy down here doesn't know what he's doing. I'm going to yell at my stats department after this. They go from the 4th hardest schedule in the nation to the 2nd easiest in the Big Ten. This year they get 5 home games instead of the 4, and 4 games that they play are against the bottom tier of this conference. They're also a much more experienced group. 9 starters returning on offense, 7 on the defense. Love to see that as you're a team kind of trying to take that next step. One of the better hires of, I guess, what was the 2023 offseason was D'Anton Lynn coming in to be the defensive coordinator. The Trojans, we keep talking about just like incremental growth. Taking that next small step is always good. You don't have to go from terrible to great. Can you go from terrible to just not that bad, and then not that bad to, hey, pretty average, and average to good? Like, it can happen in waves like that and still make a huge deal. They went from awful to actually somewhat decent, and if they can take that second step, I think you've got a really talented football team here. On offense, Jaden Maeva is the quarterback. I don't know if you've heard this little stat before, but quarterbacks tend to work out when they're linked up with Lincoln Riley. Now, this isn't your can't-miss prospect. It's not Kyler or Baker, but he's got a lot of Ferraris to throw the football to. Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane lead what's probably a top 15 receiving group in the nation. The bottom line for USC for me is that the talent on the roster, the roster is more talented than it gets credit for. And I also think the coaching staff is more talented than it gets credit for. Talented. Oh, my upstate New York accent just came out. Talented. The coaching staff is more talented than it gets credit for. With a lighter schedule, with more experience. I think the general public will come to realize shortly that USC is a legit player in the college football playoff picture, and also my 5th ranked team in the Big Ten. And if you hear me gushing about USC and you wonder, oh wow, he's got him pretty high, I am also taking, as one of my team totals in the Big Ten, USC over 7.5 wins. The odds are a little juice, -160. I think this is an 8 or a 9 team. If you want to take the alt line and get them to 9 with some really good juice, I think that's a pretty good spot to put yourself in as well.
My name's Blake.
All right, so let's keep moving along down the Big Ten Conference. We are still in the playoff contender tier. Again, conference title contender was lumped in with the top 3 national title contenders. But we're down here to our number 6 team. And let me tell you, it is really tough as a football show host to declare a team your team for the upcoming season in the very first episode. And then just a week later, you have to live up to your word and put your money where your mouth is. And I am a man of my word, so I present to you the Washington Huskies as my 6th place team in the Big Ten, and another team that I think will flirt with college football playoff conversations. Now, early on in the year, Washington is going to have to win with its offense. That defense is going to take some time to get its feet wet. Ryan Walters, the new defensive coordinator, a lot of good transfers, but still a lot of transfers. It's going to take some time to get things going. That being said, I think the offense can be very special in a way that will keep the Huskies afloat while that defense gets going. I think it'll be some really high-scoring, really great plays, high-scoring performances. Damon Williams, the quarterback, Jonah Coleman, the running back, and Denzel Boston out wide. As I said, I think that right now is the best trio in that conference. People got on me for that because they're like, oh, Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith, and oh, Oregon, you got Dante Moore. I'm talking about guys that I know I've seen on a football field be really good. Sure, 10 games in, well, we can revisit the conversation. Where it stands right now from what I've seen on a football field, that's the best trio. I'm getting a lot of my gripes out in this show. This is making me very happy. So still talking about Washington, the schedule works out nicely this year. They get the 5 conference games at home, and this is a year after having the hardest Big Ten schedule that they had to go through last year in the first year under Jed Fish. So you get to host Ohio State, Illinois, and Oregon, and really just have one tough road game heading to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. There's a really strong chance for me, and again, I'm higher on this team, so you're going to say, like, how? There's a chance to me that they're heading into the regular season finale as a 2-loss program, and that last game is against Oregon. If they can stun the Ducks at home, they're in the playoffs. They're a 2-loss team that just beat one of the top teams in the country, and if they lose, they'll be out, and I can, wave my white flag and say, I tried to make it happen. But they'll be in this thing, man. I feel really good about it. I think this offense, there's always a couple of teams that just hit it right. And they might not have the best roster in the world. In the SEC pod, we talked, and it's a lesser extent, but we talked about Arkansas. And just like, if you have one of those offenses that can just put up a 50-burger sometimes, you're going to upset some teams and get your conference really uncomfortable. I think Washington has a chance to do it. The offense is going to be a hard one to stop. And again, I just need the defense to be slightly better than what they were last year in order for them to play some more complimentary football in 2025. So the Washington Huskies, my number 6 team in the Big Ten. And that leaves us just one more team in the playoff contending tier for the Big Ten. And I really struggled with this team because I think they've got so much they need to figure out on one side of the ball, but their schedule mixed with talent on the other side of the ball make them not only just my 7th place team in a really good Big Ten, but a very legit playoff contender. And you know who I'm talking about by the way I just described him. It's the Michigan Wolverine. Michigan's front 7 is yet again going to dominate this season, and that's somehow still possible despite losing 3 guys to the NFL this past year. You had the 2 great defensive tackles, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and then Josiah Stewart, the really nice edge player, went in the middle rounds of that draft. This year, it'll be Derek Moore and TJ Guy. They're the guys to know on the edge. Damon Payne, another new run stuffer that'll be great in the middle of that defensive line. I need a year 2 bump button on the table. Year 2 bump. because of how often I say it. But that being said, Wink Martindale, second year in the system. It took a while to get things going in the early parts of year one with him. I think they won't have to worry about those adjustments this time around. I think it'll be a really solid group for the entire season, which is good because they have to figure out a lot on offense. I have my questions, but honestly, even with those questions, it can't be worse than it was last season. I think it'd be impossible for Michigan to have not gotten better at quarterback and wide receiver. And I also think the offensive line should be stronger and more experienced than they were in 2024. So say the defense is right on par from last year, and the offense just takes marginal bump. Like I said, incremental growth. And then you tie in with the fact that they have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. Yeah, it's not too hard to paint a picture where Michigan is on the fringes of making the conference title game or even into the playoff picture when it's all said and done. I prefer a few teams above them just because I guess I lean more toward offense than I do defense. Maybe that's just me being bad and me wanting more fun offenses instead of really good defenses. But Michigan very much in the playoff conversation, my number 7 team in the Big Ten. So yeah, we're rolling right on through this thing. I think this is a much better setup than what we had for the SEC. We're moving into the sleeper, sneaky team tier of the Big Ten. I've got 4 more teams for you. Then we'll briefly touch on the bowl-eligible teams and the teams that really need some improvement. But it's such a deep and talented conference. These few teams that we're going to talk about next really have my interest for so many different reasons. So my number 8 team is probably the most volatile team in the entire conference, maybe outside of Michigan, but I think this team has it over them. I could see this team finishing up as high as 4th or 5th in the Big Ten, and maybe like flirting with that final at-large bid in the college football playoffs. Or I could see them being low as 10 in the conference and maybe just barely getting to a bowl game with a 7-win season or a 6-win season for that. But either way, I've got them kind of sandwiched right in the middle. I've got the Iowa Hawkeyes as my 8th team in the Big Ten, and also the first team kicking off, as I said, this sleeper tier of teams in the Big Ten. So, as we know with Iowa, you can always count on them to have a really great defense. Kirk Ferentz is one of the best in the biz. I think they've had a top 20 scoring defense for the last decade, each year of the last decade, which is super impressive. And defensive coordinator Phil Parker is probably the best guy at his job in the nation, or at least up there with the Knowles and the Allens. There's a few guys that have definitely separated themselves. He's one of them. They've got a great defensive front this year, led by Aaron Graves and Ethan Herkett in the middle. And the secondary is expected to take a nice leap this season with some returning guys from that missed time in 2024. And now, this is going to sound crazy because we're talking about Iowa. They're going to be pretty dang frisky on offense. They bring in Mark Gronowski at quarterback from the FCS level. All that dude has done in his career is win and produce. 2 national titles at South Dakota State and 12,000 all-purpose yards across 4 seasons. I think there was a 3,000-yard passing year in there. I think he had a 1,000-yard rushing season at one point. The dude just is a baller. Now, yes, jumping from the FCS to FBS, there's going to be a different level of competition. You're not going to get those video game type numbers out of him. But there's a really good chance that this dude is probably the best quarterback Iowa's had in however long. And if that's the case, you might actually have something going here for Iowa. So they've got a strong offensive line. The wide receivers aren't amazing, but they're also kind of like Gronowski, just better than they have been. So even if you just get a little bit of a bump there, you've got a way more dynamic offense. You obviously have to replace Caleb Johnson at tailback, but the offensive line and run game in Iowa is something I feel like we can always usually count on. And you're also going to get the legs from Mark Gronowski. He's going to add in some nice stuff with his two-way capabilities. So what's nice about Iowa as well, too, they get their 3 toughest opponents, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, all at home, and do have a tough road trip early on with Iowa State, but that won't take into account the conference standings here. What makes Iowa so frisky and why they're in this sleeper upset category tier is that there's an unknown amount of potential with this offense. And we'll definitely kind of scare, the Oregons or the Indianas heading into your town. I don't know if this team has the ceiling of like a 9-win team, but it's certainly capable of hanging around for a while and spoiling someone's season. So Iowa, my number 8 team in the Big Ten, could be a really fun year if they can get things humming with this new offensive group.
Blake. What?
Uh-oh. You can hear it circling in the distance. It's getting closer and closer. It's like the Jaws theme song playing. Matt Rhule year 3. Matt Rhule year 3. Matt Rhule year 3. Now, having this team be 9th in the conference might not be the third-year jump that everybody in Nebraska is totally hoping for. I get it. But I still think this is a strong step in the right direction and the makings of a really fun and competitive Cornhusker season. So Nebraska, my number 9 team in the Big Ten. The biggest reason for that jump is that on offense, it's not only going to be the best it's been under Matt Rhule, but it's also going to be the best Nebraska has had in maybe like 5 to 7 years. Now, is that saying much? No. But it's hard for it to get worse. And I've said it 5 times each episode. Incremental growth in this sport is perfectly fine and makes a massive difference between wins and losses. Dylan Raiola is an extremely talented passer, capable thrower, and I think the marriage between semi-new offensive coordinator Dana Holgorsen coming in late last year will have this young thrower playing at a higher and more consistent level in his second season. Now, I don't think everything around him is all too great, but if Raiola is that special of a thrower and takes that next step, the guys around him are going to benefit from that. And so you may not need to have this top wideout. If Raiola and the offense is grooving, you let him do the work and get it to his targets. The biggest reason I have them in this tier is that the schedule actually works out pretty nice for Nebraska. They avoid playing Ohio State. They avoid playing Oregon, Indiana, Illinois, and Washington. Those are 5 teams. Not 5 teams. Those are 4 teams that you've heard me say this thus far. They do have a tough road trip playing at Penn State, but they also get to host their other toughest games, Michigan, USC, and Iowa. Now, those are 4 teams I clearly have above Nebraska here. Even if you just split those, say you go 2-2, maybe you can knock off an Iowa and a Michigan, but you lose to USC and Penn State. That's a nice third season under Matt Rhule's size 52 belt, and one step closer to flirting with the college football playoffs. So, again, is it a dream season for Nebraska? No, but if you can just continue to get the snowball rolling down the hill, eventually this thing will take off and you'll be flirting with the playoffs. Actually, look at that. I didn't even remember that I did this. We have got my second team total bet for the Big Ten Conference. We are taking Nebraska over 7.5 wins. That's at minus 140 odds. Taking the Cornhuskers to get to 8 wins on the season. I think Nebraska would be fine with that. I mean, are you in the college football playoff conversation? Probably not, especially if the losses happen early in the year. But after what last year was, if your offense can get a little bit of a pop and the win column hits an 8, I'd be happy. All right, 2 more teams in the sleeper sneaky category. I'm down on this team. I seem to be one of the few that is. I've got Brett Bielema and his Fighting Illini. Still part of the sleeper category, but as my number 10 team in the Big Ten. Last year was fun. Illinois, we take a look at a 9-win season. We're like, hey, that's super cool. Peel back the curtain. A lot of luck, a lot of chaotic outcomes that played into that win total. I think the roster is perfectly fine. And they've got some components that make for a really strong team. Experienced quarterback, really nice secondary. But it's not the same star caliber as a lot of these teams we've mentioned above. Like even Nebraska, even Iowa to a certain extent. Like I can name more guys on that roster than I can with Illinois. Now, despite me thinking that it's going to be a little bit of a down year for Illinois, the continuity they have from 2024, and they returned 19 starters from last season, I think that's going to help them against some of the maybe more talented teams that will be putting the pieces together early on in the season. Maybe it helps them knock off in Indiana early in the year while they're still trying to figure out the new pieces on offense they've got. Or they take down USC the week after, if things haven't really gelled there out in Los Angeles. In the end, though, I still think there's just a different talent level they're lacking, and one that will keep them outside the playoff conversation as just a frisky, upset caliber type team. So we've already spent some time talking. I really don't want to go into too much more detail, but we have our first double bet of the Big Ten. ChatGPT, those dirty dogs, are taking Illinois over 8.5 wins. That is at plus 152 odds, and your boy has to ride the under. Spring Blake betting Illinois under 8.5 wins. It's heavy juice. Minus 188. These win totals, they don't really give you the best lines in the world. We're taking Illinois to, at the very best, go 8-4 this season. And you know what? I like that ChatGPT took that one. Let them take the very trendy, hot topic. Ball knower. All right, and our final team in the sleeper sneaky category tier of the Big Ten, my 11th team in the conference, PJ Fleck's Minnesota Golden Gophers. This is just a kind of like Illinois, a really sturdy and competitive roster. There's not like a lot of studs that pop off the charts, but a lot of well-rounded position groups on both sides of the football. Best talent is in the ground game. Deep, sturdy offensive line to go with a handful of running backs, most notably Darius Taylor, A.J. Turner. Those two guys will lead the way there for the Gophers. They have a new defensive coordinator in. Danny Collins is his name. He'll take over a group that consistently has really strong play out of its front seven. I'm trying to remember the stat. I think each of the last 7 years they have a guy go in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, which is really impressive, especially coming from a program like Minnesota. And the last reason why I have them in the sleeper tier is that the schedule plays out pretty nice for them. No Michigan, no Penn State, no Indiana, no USC, no Illinois, and no Washington. Let me just do the math again. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams I have ahead of them in the standings. They don't have to play them. This is a team that could definitely get back to 8 wins like they did a year ago. And they have 2 opportunities to ruin someone's season on the road when they travel to face Ohio State and Oregon. So Minnesota, my 11th team in the Big Ten, rounds out the tier of sleeper, sneaky teams that could ruin someone's season.
You want to go to war, Malaki?
So that leaves us 7 teams in the Big Ten that I've got as bowl eligible / needs improvement. We're just going to do some quick notes on a few of these. I do want to talk a little bit about Rutgers. They are my number 12 team in the conference, a team that I believe is bowl bound this season. Last year was a roller coaster. 4-0 to start the year. Bunch of injuries hit them. They fall back to 500. Then they get some of those guys back. They have a bye week, get a little bit more fresh, and they finish 3-1, not 31. They finished 3-1 on the year, made its second consecutive bowl game after failing to hit that mark the previous 3 years. There was a part of me that considered putting Rutgers in the frisky tier. I think that this is Schiano's best team that he's had in this second stint with the university. They returned 16 starters. And again, normal growth, you should be hoping for maybe we move into an 8-win season. However, the schedule is so brutal. I mean, this is unfair for some of these teams in these conferences. They have to play Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Illinois, Iowa, and Washington. For all those reasons, I think they're a better team, but the results will be on par with what we got last season, just keeping them in that bowl eligibility conversation. Moving along to number 13, quick again, Michigan State. The Spartans will be better in this second season under Jonathan Smith. They're pretty talented at wideout, and I think Aiden Childs is a pretty good quarterback, has another year under his belt, and they did hit the portal strong at a lot of positions where it was needed. Solid improvement, tough schedule, kind of the same thing to Rutgers. It's a better team, and they will make a bowl game, so I do believe there is good growth coming here in Michigan State, but not to that point where you're like, oh, this is a frisky team in the conference. And then the last team, so those were the 2 teams I have in bowl bound, so sorry. That's the end of that bowl bound tier. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the work to do. It is Wisconsin, UCLA, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland in that order. The one that I want to touch on really quick is Wisconsin. Third team in a row now. We just talked about how Rutgers is a better team, schedule's tough. Michigan State, better team, still not ready to make that next jump. Wisconsin is a better team this year. They missed a bowl game last year for the first time in forever. But just being better does not mean you get more wins, because they have the hardest schedule in the entire nation and the worst month-long stretch of football I've ever seen. They face Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, and Oregon in back-to-back-to-back-to-back weeks. Good Lord. Now, after that, they get their bye. But, oh, wait, follow that up with Washington, Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota to close out the season. And do not forget that in week 3, they have to play Alabama. So, I feel terrible for Wisconsin fans. Luke Fickell, you would hope in another year, what is he, year 3 now, year 3 or 4? You're like, okay, let's get something going here. And you just look at the schedule and you're like, oh, we don't even have a shot. So, yeah, I feel better about that. That's how we rebound. We self-scout. We say, where did we mess up? What do we need to adjust? We get into the huddle. We come back out, and we light the thing on fire. Great Big Ten preview, tearing out. We'll go into awards, champions at a later date. Thank you guys for supporting the show, for listening. Again, I just need to say it. If you're there on the channel, in Spotify, on the podcast app, just hit that like, hit that 5-star review, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your guys' support. We'll be back on Friday with an ACC preview. It'll be just as good as this one. And then the following Tuesday, we're going to finish off with the Big 12 as we prepare for week 0 and what is going to be an amazing 2025 season here at the at the Spring Blake College Football Show. Thank you guys. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Peace.